Gentlemen, welcome to the Out Loud podcast. Today, sponsored by On the Path. I'm Tommy G and my partner Chuck. We are blessed and lucky to have Miss T here, Tara, and it says Alice, but I think she's Anaya now. So it says on her little name tag there. It's Tara Anaya. She is a softball player. She's a softball coach at the collegiate level and has been for many, many years. I try to lure her into the high school world and she won't. She puts her foot down and she stays with the big girls. And just really, I'm a huge fan and an admirer of hers. She struck out on her own. California girl, left California, went to the University of Missouri to chase her passion and chase knowledge, and dealt with the winners and the weirdos and the culture shock, I'm sure. And and just has and really got into a program with sports psychology that was one of two or one of three in the nation, right? There was not very many programs. Is that right?
Yeah, there's not that many. And the closest west, or I guess like the closest to us, would have been Denver.
Okay.
But I chose Missouri. So
little SEC action. You had some.
Yeah.
You had some love.
So I didn't mind it at all.
Well, I think we need to hear about your playing career a little bit for sure, to know where you're coming from. And then we definitely want to hear about college and stuff.
Okay. So, I guess we can start with high school, because then that's technically where I had you as a coach for 1 year. But I was trying to think about it. No, I was trying to think about it earlier though, about when exactly I started lessons with you, because it was way before high school, but I've known you for a long time. Easily to say, but in high school, I, as a freshman, started off on JV, and I think that just whole path of that and that mindset put me in this whole different box in terms of what I thought my softball career could look like.
Was that good or bad? Was it a good thing or
both? I think coming in, I came in a very heavy softball, talented class. There were a lot of freshmen that made the varsity team that year. And I don't think I realized I wasn't at that caliber or that, I guess, motivation at that point. And so I started off on JV, and then
I think you were too sweet and they were too cutthroat.
I believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then funny how it just, I guess everything happened, that my sophomore year, I was on varsity, but we had lost the previous starting shortstop for varsity team. So here comes little old me from JV and is now thrown into the starting shortstop position, and had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I know the position, but in terms of just the pressure and so to speak, the next level from JV to varsity, it was just this whole mind game that I had on myself, and the self-confidence was not there. I did not think I was ready to be there. And I know you remember this one game, but we were playing.
So I was coaching you as a sophomore?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
I was the guy that put you in that position?
Well, technically.
Sorry, man. My bad.
No, but it was so good because I remember it was one of my first games starting, and I had already racked up 6 errors, no question on the books if it was an error or not. And I went up to you and I was like, just pull me out. Clearly I'm not cut out for this. And you just said no, you got to stick it through. I don't know what to tell you. Basically, you left me there. And, hindsight 2020, I'm so glad that had happened, because thinking about it, I just needed to just go through that, that ugliness of just not being able to perform when I wanted to, and taking then the steps from there to figure out okay, well, what's going on? What's wrong? I know how to play. Mm-hmm. So what else in my game was off? And I think it was starting then that I really started to look into the mental performance side and working on that aspect, because even in travel ball and in high school, I feel I always I knew how to play. And I think a lot of that too goes back to I'm so glad my parents had me play multiple sports growing up, because, and that was something that I was thinking about too. There's a lot of things that I know that I could do well in softball, which is the sport that I chose to pursue, because I played volleyball, because I played basketball. Like there's just different like elements in my game, or like the way that I would move, that I would know like, okay, that clearly came from me being able to do that in basketball, or whatever the case is.
Well, first of all, I apologize for giving you that scar tissue, but I don't apologize because I
No,
believe
go
I believe
ahead.
those scars are important, and I believed it at that time. And just to be clear, it had nothing to do with desperation. It had to do with, I knew you could play, you can play, you
No, like
played every day in
we had
practice.
plenty of people that could have gone in and just like,
No, no, no. Yeah, exactly. Okay,
saved
yeah,
me.
that's fair. That's fair. And
Yeah.
you know, and we and Stephanie, Coach Stephanie, did a good job of making sure those other girls weren't bitches to you, you know, and we were all going to grow together, and we were all going to get good together, and it was going to be better. And
Right.
you know, I always say that I don't think my daughter would have played softball because I just don't have the gut for it. You know, it's such a painful failure game sometimes, and you did so beautifully. You know, obviously you have this awakening afterwards, but it was so great. You know, was that not your normal position? You were a second baseman primarily?
No, I was always a shortstop, but I think like
See, come on, man.
I'm
It sounds funny now when you talk about it, right?
Softball player, like, well, when I was on JV, they really needed a pitcher. So I pitched that my first year. Yeah. And so, you know, because I knew how to like do it. So they had me throw. But I feel like it's different when you're put into, I feel like, a higher level of play when you're not ready for it mentally, or if you don't have the confidence. And I think that's like where I was at that time. Like I knew how to play, I knew the game, but
I'm not super tolerant of that part of that game. You know, I'm not super tolerant of kids saying, "Oh, I can't do this or I can't do that." You know, you Mexican or you Mexican. You know that. I mean, that's kind of my mentality. And just so you know, Chuck and I just spent an hour literally talking about that exact same thing, about playing multiple sports and having that sort of cross training physically, mentally situation. It's so weird that
it's so weird because as a coach now, like I can look at my girls and I can know like she played multiple sports growing up, and I can tell the ones like, even when I'm out recruiting, like I know she's only played softball, or her parents have only stuck her with softball because that was going to be like her specialized sport. And I wish parents didn't do that. That's just like from my perspective, because there's so many different elements, not just like physically, but mentally, that I've learned that I could have only learned from not playing softball, from playing other sports.
Do you think there's a diminishing return playing that many games in 1 year as a softball girl? Do you think at some point you no longer get polished and you deteriorate? Is that something that you see as a college coach?
I feel like, so like looking at, I feel like more of like the travel ball world. Because then with us, just with the way that D3 is, like there's really no way for them to get burnt out because we only get them in season. But looking at, I feel like travel ball,
that's what I mean.
Yeah. like burnout, I feel like it happens so easily because they're throwing these girls into all these recruiting camps, all these tournaments, and it's just like repetitive, and the pressure's on. They have to get noticed, they have to get recruited, and I could easily I can tell when the girls are just like burnt out. Right. And I feel like, at least for me growing up, I know I was busy all the time. Like I always had something going on, but looking back at it now, like I don't think I ever felt, at least for me, like burnt out with softball, because it wasn't always softball busy. It was like, okay, we have basketball practice, we have tournaments, we have volleyball. And so
just that change, just that change in atmosphere is such a rejuvenating kind of a thing for kids, you know. And a lot of those kids that get stuck in that burnout, or they just get tired of being around that kind of intensity in the same, and get bored, but they don't, they have a hard time making it back. You know, when they step out and take a year off and stop playing, they open up their world to a whole new, you know, a whole new way of relaxing and being, you know, peaceful and calm in between. And it's hard to go back to that, you know, after that. So yeah, it's an interesting concept to see.
I know that. I know that the big thing with I never really did much travel ball as a coach. And so I'm always looking at it from this curious perspective and this sort of, what are they doing? And my biggest problem was they didn't understand the game, Chuck. So you would play five games, but you wouldn't have the day-to-day nuts and bolts, the heads up baseball concept. Like
sure.
Why do we do this first and third defense? Or what is a double steal? Or what is a pickle? Like you didn't have, and you had that bench time where kid would come off after failing. Unfortunately, it was the only time you ever talked to a kid is when they failed and said, "Hey, sweetheart, here's what you're missing." And okay, go out there, get your glove and go. It's like, oh, you're up. And there was no time where we could talk about the game and understand the game. You were getting reps and you were having competition, but you don't know how many times I went out to a softball field and seen the most flat, most low energy, most boring, most ugly softball I've ever seen in my life. And when we come to high school, Chuck, when it's 25 games, it's maximum intensity. You're on the fence, you're cheering, you're screaming. And when you get to the Division I level, you watch the World Series, that's what you see. You have girls on the bench that haven't taken a swing all year that are screaming their hearts out in that championship game. And so in one way it makes you ready, in one way it doesn't, And I don't know if that's your experience, but for me, that's
so you get through your sophomore year, and where does it go from there?
So I mean, at that point, like I started to develop like this interest in just like the mental game and figuring out not only like myself. It's so funny that you mentioned that, like I was too nice, because as I was thinking just like about like high school and kind of like my story, there's one friend that I had in high school who I think she played a few sports, but she was more smart, on the smart end. And she would always tell me, like, Tara, you're too nice. Like, you need to be a jerk sometimes. Like she was just like, you're too nice. And it wasn't until I kind of heard it from her, I'll never forget, like, I feel like because of her, I started to kind of have like a little bit of an edge and grew in that and had more confidence in myself. And I feel like that carried out on the field, and it started to develop to where, like, even if I did
putting
make
a hard
mistake,
tag on somebody, whack.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I feel like I carried myself with a little bit more like sass, but still, respectful. But I just had like more of this confidence in myself that I knew what I was doing. I could do it. I was still open to learning, but I needed to kind of have that sass. And that's kind of like, I feel like my high school story. And then I think throughout the whole,
would you agree, Tara? Would you agree that almost all of your girls on your collegiate team are SAS plus? I mean, is that what it takes to get to the pinnacle of college softball?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I think because of where I ended up at Laverne with it being Division III, I feel like you get kind of different athletes at that level in terms of like we're not on scholarship, we're there to play. And at least for like speaking for Laverne, like we worked out hard, we did weights, we did conditioning, and if you didn't want to be there, like you weren't getting money to play, you weren't, it wasn't our job, it was something that we got to do for fun. And so if you weren't there to win and be competitive, like there's nothing holding you or tying you to stay. And so I feel like being able to play with other girls with that same mentality that just wanted to get after it and, still not have necessarily our identity tied to being a softball player. Like we obviously, like we were softball players, we wanted to win, but then that was only from January till June. And the rest of the year, like, yes, we're still working out, but we can't practice. We had to do stuff on our own. So it just looked different. So I feel like it kind of gave us, I don't know, I feel like I was more of a whole person, or I got to find different things that I was interested in because of the dynamic of Division III.
And you had the sassiest coach of all time, though, right? I mean, she was an Olympic athlete. What was her name?
Julie Smith of 96.
So Julie Smith, Chuck, was a gold medal winner in softball coaching at Division III, and I'm sure you can imagine her standard. I remember speaking to you, T, about it. Like, Jesus, man, she wants to kill me. Or, I'm like, no,
Mm-hmm,
she
mm-hmm.
was rough. She was rough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it was like, I mean, kind of thinking about it now, and especially as being a coach, I think about if I had to coach myself, like the type of athlete that I was. And I was pretty hard-headed.
Yeah.
I feel like at that point. And so
I think all three of us share that same concept. We're all coaches, and we were kind of hard to coach. We have that conversation from time to time about how it would have been to coach ourselves, and it probably wouldn't have been as easy as we try to pretend it is. But during that time, you were studying sports psychology, and how did that, with a coach like that, did it influence how your thought process went as to what, now you're a coach now, and did you develop some of those instincts during that time?
So when I was at Laverne, they had like limited sports psych classes. So whatever they had, I took. And we were actually, like the team was utilizing one of the sports psych professors there. So she worked with us. And that was when I kind of got to see like actual sports psychology concepts delivered to a team. And so that was pretty cool because we did a lot of
visualizing,
like just identifying our strengths and like what are our values and stuff that wasn't even like at first related to softball, so to speak, and then getting us all on the same page to then, okay, what does it look like what does that conversation look like when we're stepping into the box? Like, what are we telling ourselves when we make a mistake? And just having that open dialogue of being able to help each other out and help each other see what kinds of things need to be said in certain situations in order for us to be successful. So I think because we had that, and I don't know at that point in time, because I feel like sports psych was kind of not new, but not a lot of people were talking about it. And it was, I feel like it still had like maybe a negative reputation.
It was
like
for broken athletes. It was for broken athletes.
So I'm glad that I got that taste of it because I got to really see how it helped my game. And so I know myself, and I think there was only a few other girls that utilized her for like one-on-ones after. And I think that personally really helped me because then I was able to kind of just sit down with her and talk like my game specifically and what was going on. And most of the time it wasn't even like softball specific related. It was just I was taking things into the field and just things like that. And I think it's just so important to be aware of those things. And like I said, I wouldn't have had that without like having that introduction of applied sports psychology with the softball team. And so I feel like with that is what made me interested in pursuing sports psych for my master's degree, like higher education.
Nice. So before we get too far, 2 questions that I need you to answer. Number 1, what was it like to be coached by me? Number 2, what was, if somebody's listening, even, no matter what sport, what was the initial portal to start learning about the head game, the mental game? What was the first thing that you sort of went, oh, wow. And for just so you know, for me, it was really examining my heroes because I was lucky enough to play football. And what does Joe Montana do? What does he eat? What kind of cereal does he eat in the morning? Where does he live? How does he work out? And that's ridiculous. And that's very inefficient, right? Because we're never going to know. But like, what was the thing that sort of went, okay, here's the path. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pursue this with reckless abandon.
So I would say being coached under you.
I was just kidding about that. You don't have to.
Well, I want to answer it just like.
Well, what do you think made her crazy enough to start to think about sports psychology?
Yeah, I'm the one that made you all goofy.
No, I feel like you were demanding, but without being demeaning. Like you demanded, you had expectations for us, just or as a person, but you never went about it in in a demeaning way. Like you were demanding, but in a very good way, in a way that allowed us to grow.
I learned it from that guy. That's the guy that taught me to do it, and then I teach you. Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate it. That's very nice of you to say. What was the portal? What was the signpost? Where was the point with the fork in the road?
Well, I mean, it's ironic, I guess, that it's with you, but I feel like once you introduced me to Mind Gym, and I read Mind Gym, and I had never even thought about the game in that way. And I think like the light bulb or the like aha moment was when basically it was just talking about like how you visualize yourself playing. Like, can you see in your mind yourself being successful?
Right.
And it wasn't until I thought that and realized like I could play back positive moments that I was successful, moments that I know I can do A, B, and C, and then use that into my game while obviously like implementing like affirmations and positive self-talk. But I don't think it wasn't until I read that and processed it that I realized like, yeah, like clearly like our minds are so strong, but like at that point I wasn't even like tapping into that part of my game. I was just kind of reacting in physical, motions. And that was key for me because then in play or in practice, I started to realize like I could be successful by using that part of my mind. Like even if I made a mistake, like process and see myself do it correctly over and over and over and over. And
I think that there was a big thing where Tara was one of those kids where there was no punishment or words that anyone could say that would make her feel worse than the punishment she gave herself. And I'm sure that was the way it was with your parents as well. I'm sure you didn't get put in the corner very often. But the other thing that I want you guys, so Mind Gym is a book that you can find on Amazon that I had come across, and Tara seemed to be one of those people that was, I was giving out books for Christmas and that was my book of the year. And so that was it. But also we had spent time together as a hitting instructor, a one-on-one hitting instructor relationship. And we would have a half-hour lesson and probably spend at least 5 minutes sort of psychologically analyzing stuff and getting the head right, which I thought was more important than the swings almost, and so we had a very close relationship with performing, in sports and wanting to succeed. But it wasn't really that selfish. I mean, Mind Gym is those kind of concepts that you're talking about, Tara, help you as a mother, help you as a businesswoman, help you as a wife.
Oh yeah.
And a sister and a daughter,
Having some sort of control over your self-talk is probably the number one thing that helps you get through the world on a general, no matter what age you are. That self-talk is a destroyer. And we learned how to do some of that when I learned how to do some of that with our kids, football wise, it really made a difference because they didn't even understand what that meant, and once they had a little glimmer of, once they had a little glimmer of that, it changed their outlook on things,
Right. It's like, I feel like you grow up and people tell you like, well, just think positive. And it's not until you really like process that and think about it and see, okay, how can we do that? Like, how can we talk to ourselves positive or like have that growth mindset?
You don't want to get the straitjacket put on you because you're crazy. You're not hearing voices.
But I feel like it's like once that door is cracked open in the athlete or yourself is open to learning those things, that's where when you start to see like the personal growth. Narnia. At least from my experience. Yeah.
So you had, I mean, I would say that and I didn't get to go to many of your games. I probably went to one game a year in college for you, to be honest with you. But I believe that your career was up and down, emotionally, physically. You guys won some, you lost some. You had more than one coach, right? You had more than one head coach.
Or she was the head coach the whole time, but I think every year we rotated through assistant coaches.
Yeah, she's probably tough to work for, right? But you persevered. Probably. You learned the toughness. You persevered. You gained. You grew, and then you decided to go away to Missouri for your master's.
I did.
Tell us about that decision because that was wacky.
So after graduating from Laverne, I took the year off. I didn't go straight to Missouri. And at that point, I was still coaching. Like my senior year, I coached a travel ball team, the travel ball team that I had played for. And I continued to coach with them. And it was during that time when I was trying to figure out, I guess, like that next step. And luckily I had still maintained contact with the professor that I had at Laverne that taught me sports psych, and kind of reached out to her and just wanted to know more about like the higher education. I was just kind of curious because I didn't really know what I wanted to do.
And I was chasing you to be a coach for me at the exact same
Yeah.
time. You wouldn't do it.
And so she had told me about this sports psychology like convention that was happening in Atlanta that year. And so I went to my dad and I was like, I know this sounds crazy, but would you want to go with me to Georgia and like go to this sports psych convention to see if this is something that I would want to pursue? And so once I was there, she kind of let me shadow her and go to different workshops. But they had a graduate program workshop there, and so Missouri was one of the ones that was like talking and did a little spiel about their graduate program, what the students do with the teams. And as soon as I heard that, like I just had notes on my little notebook, and I was like, that is a school that I want to go to.
So you guys had they had the practical application sort of with the teams. Wow.
Yeah, so like this person would come up and she says like, I work with gymnastics, volleyball, and basketball, and these are the different topics that I do with the team, blah, blah, blah. And then the next guy would come up and he would talk about like, okay, well, I work with wrestling and men's basketball. And so it's just everything that they talk about was stuff that I wanted to consume. And so that's how I ended up in Columbia, Missouri for 2 years.
Wow.
That's cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you get to work with the softball team in your second year, or who did you work with?
So technically the PhD students were the only ones that got to be like hands-on with the teams. But for my internship, I did it under the sports psych PhD student that worked with the softball team. So I got to kind of shadow her with like everything that she did. Because ideally, like when I moved out to Missouri, the long game was for me to stay and get my PhD. But of course, the way life happens, my luck happens, the PhD program shut down. So I missed it by like a half semester or a semester. And so whoever was in it was going to be able to continue and get their PhD, but then they weren't allowing any more students into the program. And so I had to then figure out, what I wanted to do with sports psych and where I was at with just my master's. And then that's what brought me back home essentially. But long game initially was I was going to be there for like 5-6 years to
Did you have
PhD.
Did you have any personal victories with any of the players individually, even at that level? Were you helping people? Did you feel that sense that things were getting better for these athletes, or you were laying back and observing, or how did that work?
It was more of laying back, but I got to see, so like the sports psych student that I got to work with, the PhD student, she was the one delivering all of the like mental skill techniques and all of that. And so I got to see it, but from her delivery. Because at that point, like they weren't going to let any master's students work with the teams. Coaches are, and D1 SEC coaches are very, very protective of their athletes. And so I feel like even being allowing to like just be there and shadow and keep my mouth shut was a lot. So, but I learned a ton because I got to, she worked with gymnastics, softball, women's volleyball, and women's basketball. And so I did not
get a chance to shadow a men's sport.
I got to shadow her like basically as she worked with them. So anything sports psych related that she would do with the girls, I got to be basically like in the same room and watch her deliver it. But in terms of being at practices day to day, no, that was not allowed, I guess.
What I mean, do you work with the male athletes at all at that time, or just the female athletes?
I didn't get to see it delivered like hands-on, but through like we had meetings every week. And so everyone that was a part of the sports psych program, whether it was master's or PhD, we got together and kind of talked about different things that were going on. And so if the guy that was working with like men's basketball had an issue or wanted to discuss something, it would be brought to the table for all of us to kind of listen and chime in. And so that was something that I kind of enjoyed too, because I got to kind of hear different perspectives and figure out solutions from a bunch of different people.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. What was it? Did you connect with any of the methods of obviously the program, you got exposed to a lot of different things. What was the methods that ultimately you seem to have connected with, and what did you use the most in your coaching career?
Well, I think for me, I think my favorite class was one of the first classes that I took, which was like an applied positive coaching class. And I didn't really know what that was until I was in it. And it was just talking about like the way in which we coach and what are we trying to teach our athletes outside of like stripping the sport, whatever it is. What life skills are you giving these athletes, and what are you teaching them, and how are you making them better athletes or better people to then essentially be better athletes? And so it made me think back to like growing up, how I had been coached my entire life and how I probably would have then coached, but taking it back and looking back at it and how I wanted to be able to help my athletes develop confidence to, like be strong women. Because I mean, I only work with women. And
right.
So I kind of had to change the way I coached up until that point. Because I had coached travel up until then. And I feel like the poor girls that had me probably as a coach during those times, because I'm not the same person. I'm not the same coach that I was then. But I think it's just like stripping it down. To me, it's like I need to be able to know my athlete as a person and what their strengths are and how I can help them be confident in that, but then also like where their areas for growth and how am I going to help them get there, not only with like in the way in which I talk to them, but just figuring out like what works best for them and making them better people. I think that's like, and I know it sounds weird because it has nothing to do with softball, but that's like my environment that I get to do it in. And that's the sport that I know and I love. And
right. That's your lab. Yes. I this is very easy for me to, for me, because I know that when you achieve collegiate status, it doesn't matter where. I mean, you get to that level, you're 10% of all the kids in America. Division I level, you're 1%, and the commitment, I mean, we kind of touched on it. The commitment in travel ball and being busy all the time really limits your ability to develop a well-roundedness. I mean, you were very well-rounded. Your parents did a great job, but not everybody has that. And the sacrifices you have to make with church and the sacrifices you have to make with maybe cheating and lying and stealing and doing what you got to do to get to the top doesn't make for a very good human being sometimes. And we often see on ESPN somebody falling from grace, a DUI or a domestic violence. And Colleen was always asking me, he's like, what's wrong with these guys? I'm like, well, they're not fully human. They're larger than life superheroes. They're not fully human. And I just love the fact that you're willing to say, hey, the long game is if we can make you a better human, you're going to perform a lot better. I mean, it's a little bit of faith, but it's not really faith. I mean, it's really straight math, if you ask me.
Well, I mean, even not necessarily working with the students at MIZZOU, but getting to see kind of hands-on, like what was being taught and what were the different like issues that were always brought up with athletes. And I feel like, yes, you're going to get your different issues at whatever level you're at. So clearly I coach D3 right now. And so some of the issues that were brought up for Division I were obviously different, but I feel like when you take it back, a lot of it stems from them just as into like being people first. And so I feel like we can teach them how to, like, we can have them have a perfect pre-performance routine, but if their confidence is completely shot and they don't know how to bring themselves back up to it, knowing that isn't going to help them, or taking 100 reps of whatever this is, and then having a gorgeous swing is not going to help them if their mind isn't in the right headspace to do it. Yes, they can get away with being successful for so long, but I feel like that's kind of the thing that made me even more interested, I feel like, in the sport, because I knew then, going back to coaching, obviously I'm going to be teaching fundamentals, but at the same time, a lot of it, at least coming from me, is not necessarily like softball specific. It's talking about, okay, like, how do you define success? Like, let's start there. Because if you're a numbers person and you're always looking at your stats, like, we're going to have issues, because that's clearly not, reflective of who you are as a person. And so kind of just, for me, dialing it back for a lot of my athletes and working with them and helping them at least like view things from a different perspective, because I'm sure growing up, and I'm talking softball specific with like the travel ball world, it's heavy in terms of like stats and, what team are you playing for? And it's a lot of like fluff and prettiness, and they can't carry that on at the next level. Yes.
Let me just play the devil's advocate. Isn't it enough that we teach our players to be champions? I mean, aren't they going to learn enough just by winning and all the things that it takes to win? Is that not enough in your estimation? I think I know the answer, but.
Well, I feel like there's obviously, so I'm going to think from like the coach's perspective. I feel like I've seen teams that have been super successful and win, but those people as individuals struggle later on, or they still are conflicted post sport.
Yeah.
And so like, I would rather have you strive to be a better person, and that hopefully and essentially help you be a better athlete. And regardless of the wins and losses, obviously we want to win, we want to be competitive, but I don't think it should all lie in that if you win or if you have a champion. Like, I don't have a championship ring, but I feel like I was a pretty successful athlete, and I think it's
well received?
How you define it.
Is that well received in your job interviews? I mean, you go up to a head coach and say, well,
Well, I feel like even in the softball world, I feel like it's still a little different, even just being female. And so I think there's still a lot of, hoops that we have to go through, even though we are a female sport. But I don't know. I don't know. It's tough.
I'm just pushing you. I'm sorry. I just want to hear.
I like it. My wheels are turning.
One of the interesting things that at some point in my career, I learned some things about, how do you present to your athletes to be able to get the biggest reaction from them? And I went in, when I took my last head coaching job 9 or 10 years ago, I went into a program that had struggled for years. And the first thing that I said to them, now we got all these kids lined up in the classroom, and I'm walking in and getting introduced for the first time. And I say to them, you have one job and one job only, and that's to love each other. And I only have one job, and that's to love you. And the looks on their faces were like, who the hell did they just hire? Who is this hippie goofball? We got a bunch of semi-hood kids and kids from tough neighborhoods who really were really afraid. I had talked to some of them down the road a little ways. Once they understood that loving you meant that I was going to confront you on every bit of bad behavior, and I was going to hold you accountable. And you loving each other was about holding each other accountable and not allowing bad behavior. It changed everything, because then they understood what that meant. And, we had to go through a long process before they could understand it. But true love isn't about me. It's about being able to relate to you and understand you. And so are there unique things that you would say are different for coaching girls and women that you noticed and have kind of geared yourself toward?
I feel like women were complicated, but I think kind of the core things that I see with, doesn't matter, because I've coached junior college and now I'm at Division III. Like, a lot of what these girls want is just like the reassurance that they're good, or the reassurance that they can succeed. And so I feel like helping them, like, I'm not going to tell them what they want to hear. but by getting to know them, getting to know what their strengths are, and knowing them as a person, I can develop a relationship to where if I know they're slacking or if I know they're not working hard, I can clearly call them out on it, and they can be upset, whatever the case is, but they know that it's coming from a place of like love and caring, because I know you can do better and I expect better. But I think it's really helping. Like the biggest thing that I see is when I help my athletes discover like what their natural strengths are, not as an athlete, like as a person. Like I always have my athletes take, if they can, because it costs money. So if we have it in the budget, I have them take the Clifton Strengths Finder and figure out what their strengths are. And then if not, I do like a free one. But having everybody take that and see what their natural strengths are, because then I can figure out too, like how I can communicate with you. If I know humor is in your top 5, I know I can crack jokes with you and you're not going to take it personally. Like I know we can have that type of relationship, but then I can have another athlete and her top strengths, like it could be like humility and just different ones. And I know I maybe have to be a little bit softer with that athlete and still direct, but I have to go about it in a way that's going to meet her needs and be able to not have her close that door on me.
Man, Tara, that's cheating. That's cheating. You know all the answers, man. That's the hardest part about coaching. You're a cheater.
It's tough. We do a lot of we'll go into the room and go, okay, Johnny, give me a positive self-statement, and that is like the hardest thing in the world for young athletes to do. I mean, it took us
or even hearing it. Like I feel like hearing it too. Like I do different like activities where they have to share, like we're going around the room and I'd have to talk about Tom and say like, what about you as a player, as a person that I admire, and even like teaching them to receive that and be open to compliments and affirmations. It's a different like dynamic for them, because I feel like a lot of the times they want to just like brush it off or like laugh, like, okay, thanks, but really embrace that that's how you're seen and you're viewed, and own it. Because I feel like, at least maybe for women, I don't know if maybe the guys are different, but they wear it a little bit different.
Yeah.
I think they're not so different, and we had to do a lot of, so tell me what you heard, and have them repeat back what they heard about themselves. And it, again, kids struggled, with that kind of thing, but it developed a certain confidence that gave them the ability to allow themselves to be complimented and, stuff like that. But it's not easy. And I don't think it is easy. Along those lines what's your team building strategies, and what did you do to build the camaraderie and the team building between your athletes?
So I feel like, this is my first year at Laverne, my alumni, so Division III, and it's very different. And it's different now, even being on the coaching end, because I think as an athlete, it was like, oh, we just go to weights and conditioning all fall and not have to worry about softball. But then me as a coach, like I'm like, we need practice, we need to do all these things. And so kind of the way that we got to build relationships with our girls in fall, because again, we're not like allowed field time with them. We did a lot of our fundraising then. And so we would go and work.
That's so smart. That's so smart.
We would go and work like the Rams games, the SC games, just as like stadium like personnel, and we would get to be with the girls for like 10 hours a day. But I mean, although it was long days, they were tired, they didn't necessarily want to be there, like when we were making money for our program, but two, it gave us opportunity to have a lot of time with them and just get to know them and have them in the van and get to hear them talking and get to kind of know our personalities, because all of us, at least this past year, were new. So speaking from just this past year experience, I think that's kind of how we at least developed initial relationships. And then once we got to the field, again, because we don't have a lot of time with them before we're basically thrown into, okay, this is game 1 and now you're in conference play. We just tried to do a lot of little things at practice wherever we could. And I think one of the bigger things that we did, at least this past year before we got cut off because of COVID, we brought in, so my head coach, his wife works at Pepperdine, and she works with students and like and faculty with like teaching them how to like build, I guess, like team camaraderie and all of that. So we had her work with our girls, and we stepped out, and so they kind of developed like what their team mantra wanted to be and just different standards that they wanted. And then we kind of came in and worked with them and owned it with them, but wanted to make sure they were accountable, and they came up with it first, not us coming in and saying like, this is what we're doing this year, kind of just giving them accountability. So I think that that was kind of cool, because it was something that I think before I was always the one implementing it, and then being on this side to where I didn't necessarily have to, and just kind of wear my like only softball hat on as a coach, was pretty interesting, and it was nice. So
I know that I know that what you're talking about is very, very individualized and very, very much about the individual athlete. And I know coming from St. Paul, it was all about particularly tradition. And I felt like tradition was a huge part of our success, our long distance success. We had good teams and bad teams, but they were always consistently excellent in certain ways. You know, the together we're better, and hitting the sign on the way out, the play like a champion, and wearing the uniforms that everybody wore. And a lot of the football stuff, Chuck, by the way, you know,
Sure.
I really leaned into the idea that they needed to know about who was before them, and they needed to live up to that. Is that a hard balance for you, to deal with the individual, but also see the team globally and push them as a group and not just as an individual?
Well, so I think kind of like what you're saying too, I think because I was an alum, and because now they play at this gorgeous stadium. They have like their locker room, and they have all this. I played at a public park. Like we had little T-ballers next to like the field right next to us, playing at the same time we would be playing. And so kind of giving them that perspective and letting them, like, I was in the same uniform, but my experience looks very different than yours. And so just being appreciative of everyone that it took to get to where we are at now with the facility and the status that we have. I just always think that that was always important to me, because clearly I came from that program.
You just missed it, right? They were like building the stadium like as you were graduating, right?
Oh, that was one of the recruiting like tools used. Like, we're gonna have a brand new stadium. I'm like, okay, maybe you're still
by your doctorate, but when you get your doctorate,
still having broken ground, huh? But
yeah, Tommy, that was the NAU, that was the NAU story, Tommy. I got there just after they built the dome, and all those guys before were bitter. You know, they built a brand new indoor dome stadium, and you know, otherwise they were playing out in the old stadium with snow and just ridiculous. But that's a different motivator. The school that I just retired from built a $19 million football stadium. You know, and it was
Pioneer High School.
Yeah, everybody thought that was going to be the end all, and that was going to be the way that we were going to recruit and all those kind of things. But you know, I don't care if you play in a big stadium or a small stadium. There's certain chemistries that happen on good teams that kind of transcend those things. What's your thoughts on the coaching in the days of COVID, and not necessarily the coaching aspect of it, but just from the athlete's point of view? We're all a little worried about kids that are missing seasons and ultimately maybe missing their senior seasons. And what would you suggest? What would be your suggestions if you could talk directly to those kids?
Well, so I think, like, first, I feel like I'm in a unique position, because if we make it to early March and we don't have a season this year, I will have gone a year without coaching. Wow. And I've never gone that long without coaching. And I think the timing of COVID, and then the timing of having my son, like, I was planning on not being as present in fall, because that's when I was having him. And, you know, we have a strong coaching staff to where it wouldn't skip a beat without me being there, and I can do stuff from home. But
don't kid yourself.
Well, I mean, we weren't playing games, so, you know, it's okay. Yeah. But I think from that perspective, like, I'm glad in a weird sense that all of this is happening kind of in timeline with my life. Like I'm not missing out on a lot of things, but now that it's coming up on, okay, we're supposed to be starting season, like we should be on campus right now, like January, our Jan term starts and we should be at the field every single day, and that's not happening. I mean, I think we kind of talked about it in the beginning of just like, if I'm sure our girls were burnt out when COVID happened, because we were in the midst of our season. They got a big break. I'm sure at some point it was almost like a relief, but now it's, you know, I think it's a big question of what's happening, because at least in our position, we don't know yet. Like we haven't gotten answers in terms of, yes, we're playing, we're going to have a season, or no, we're not. And so it's this uncertainty that they don't have control over. And I think they're still trying to also manage learning online. And we come from, at least like our school has a lot of very knowledgeable professors, but then aren't necessarily savvy online and having it translate the way that I know that they would want. And so I know a lot of our girls are struggling with that and having to almost teach themselves a curriculum. So being a student athlete, I feel like there's a lot more on their plate now. And I think, at least from the feedback that I've been getting, I think softball for us has taken a back seat, and they're trying to focus on learning online and having this whole new world kind of brought into them under no, you know, they can't control it. And so I think it's been tough, because although again, we're Division III and they have other things that they do during the year, they're still athletes. And so not having that outlet, not being able to be a softball player, to be competitive, I feel like it takes a toll. And I feel like we've already seen, at least in our case, girls decide that regardless if there's a season or not, it's not going to be for them. They're not going to return. And, you know, I struggle with it, because on one end I get it, but then on the other end too, it's just hard to see athletes, I guess, like leave the game when, you know, in them they still have a lot as, like, you know, to contribute physically, mentally, as a team. But I get like I feel like too, there are more important things, like their mental health is way more important. So I don't know.
Are you guys doing?
I know I'm jumping, but I'm sorry.
Are you guys doing anything as a staff that is irregular, that just to reach out, just kind of outside the box? Are you guys doing regular text checks in? Or are you doing Zooms?
I know I just kind of got brought back onto like all that stuff. So I was kind of on like my little maternity leave. So now would have been the time where,
yeah,
COVID or not, I would have been, you know, back into it. And so as far as I know, in fall, there was a lot of like check-ins. I came on a few Zooms with them when I could. But in terms of anything else that we've done, I think it's just been that. And I wish, you know, I mean, looking at it now, I wish I would have been a little bit even more involved where I could, or just reach out one-on-one. Because I'm not going to lie, like a lot of my life, like even right now, I haven't taken my mom hat off in a while, and I haven't had my coaching hat on in a while. So like I'm excited about this, but at the same time, like, wow, like I haven't talked like this and having like this kind of conversation in a while. And I feel like it's the same for our girls. Like when we do our check-ins and touch base with them, I feel like there's distance, not necessarily like in a bad way, but it's just like, okay, like softball now, let's talk about what's going on. Let's catch up. But I know they're drained. I know they're tired. I know they're like, they just want answers. They just want to be able to play.
I think the successful folks out there, you know, I keep my ear to the ground all the time, even though I'm not a head man anymore. I think the successful people just act as if, and I think they feed their athletes what they need. You know, these kids, the thing that was striking to me when I was a college coach, I coached college softball at the Division II level. And what I found was so striking was these girls were incredibly competitive. they were able to beat that sort of duality where they had to be, oh, I have to have the bow in my hair and go to prom, and I have to be this person because my boyfriend is going to be intimidated by me. Now I get to be this person that kicks ass. And they loved it. And we would, I just imagine in my mind, if I was in your chair, like, you know what, we're going to get on a Zoom and we're going to play freaking Family Feud, or we're going to do some kind of competitive thing and we're going to scream at each other, and we're never going to get to the end of the game. And the Monopoly board is going to get knocked over because we're all gangsters, and we're going to embrace and feed that fire.
Right.
Because I think that, I mean, you just went through childbirth. You need that. You don't need the other bullshit. You need the toughness, and you need the fire, and you need to, I mean, there was some mind gym going on when you were laboring. I mean, you had to keep your head about you. You could not lose your mind for your child. And you know,
I was focused on my breathing.
Yeah, right. So,
like, don't talk to me.
I wonder what the most dynamic people are doing. And I love, we talked to another coach. We talked to Rick Cepeda at St. Paul, and he was just like, those 3 words, I don't know, are not in the vocabulary. We are just proceeding as if. We're just waiting for the green light, and we're just going to do everything and act as if. And, you know, that's the only thing we can do, because otherwise you're surrendering to the unknown, and you're surrendering to the unstable, and you're surrendering to things that are going to make people's minds messed up. And all that work is going to get screwed up.
Trying to control the things you can't control is one of the most frustrating things that we do repetitively, that we don't even notice sometimes. It's the only thing I say to the kids that call me and say, Coach, I'm going nuts. You know, what can I do? What should I do? And I said, stay ready. Stay ready. So when the green light comes, you're ready to go. Otherwise, the rest of it is you have no control over it. So work harder in the class,
right.
You know, do better and do some extra work on your project and things like that. But do something that you're active, you know, because the sitting and waiting and wondering is the killer, you know.
Yeah. I think softball is so unique and all female. I mean, you kind of alluded to it before. I really was very blessed as a coach, because I always coached softball and always coached football at the same time. So talk about switching hats, you know. And there was a time where I stopped switching hats and just started being a coach. And the things that the girls game brought me helped me on the men's side, and the things that the men's side helped the women's side. And it became very dynamic, and I could just be fluid all the time. And but I felt so bad for the girls, because I was asking you guys to do stuff that wasn't ladylike, wasn't, you know. And please understand that you were caught in the middle. Prior to you, you know, and when I was going to school, it was very butchy. There was a lot of sexual politics going on in softball. It was very, maybe I don't want to go see that. And then you guys were the first group of sort of, you know, lovely ladies that fucking kicked ass. And, you know, and I just always remember the biggest thing in all those years of coaching, going to the banquet. You know, we go, you know, these girls would show up, tie their hair back, sweat, rip, get dirty, get blood, you know, very much like a League of Their Own, right? You know, the women's professional. And then I don't know who these girls are that came to the banquet, Chuck. I mean, they would be glammed up, and I'd be like, wait, who are you? And I don't know you. Let me introduce and I'm sure you said the same thing with my suit and my tie. Like, who's this clown? You know, like, you know, but I just remember what a challenge because I didn't have to do that. I mean, I could just be a football guy. And if I didn't want to be a football guy, I could be an egghead schoolboy. And if I didn't want to do that, I could be a boyfriend. And if I didn't want, you know, but the idea that you guys were literally tougher than your boyfriends most of the time, and you were stronger mentally than your boyfriends most of the time. And I would venture to say, probably even as an adult, the women are the superior program. But, you know, like I think everyone knows, but, you know,
yeah, we do.
Yeah, we're dudes. We know that you guys are the bomb.
Those of us who have transcended the egomaniac lifestyles that we're all brought up to have as men, you know, we've transcended that part at this point. We're glad to be alive in 2020, but or 21.
Giving him permission, Chuck. Give him permission to be badasses was like something that's for some women you had to be deliberate. And to some degree, Tara, for you a little bit, I had to say, you know, you got to go out there and be a badass. You're a strong woman. Yeah. You're a badass woman. Don't hide that. You know, no one's looking. And if they are looking and they don't like it, then fuck them. And I'm sure we had that exact conversation at some point.
Oh, probably. I'm sure, because like, just like you said, like I remember I literally came in and I was always just like the good kid, and I listen, I don't ever have like any issues, but
follow the rules.
I never really spoke my mind, or I was always like afraid to share, because I feel like I don't know when it developed, but I feel like I always kind of thought the game from a coaching lens too, not just as an athlete. Like I would think the game and think in certain situations, like, why don't we call this here? Or why don't we have this shift on? And so finding my voice to share that was when I feel like my game elevated. But then too, I mean, once I got to college,
was your
not
coach,
as easy
was
to
your
like
coach
tell my
open
coach, hey, I think we got to be doing this.
Was she open to she wasn't open to the feedback?
Oh no.
Oh.
Yeah, well, I tried that too.
What a tragedy.
I'll just be like, I was in the dugout trying to give like the steel sign, like, come on, like, let's do it this one right now. This is when we got to do it.
Like, what? Settle down over there.
Tara, let me ask you if you could look into the camera and give some advice to the young ladies out there that hopefully will listen and get something out of this. What would be your 30 seconds of advice to young ladies and young girls that are, again, athletes that are trying to make their way in the athletic world?
I would say be confident in who you are, but then also be open to learning and to growing. And so I think that people are here, and your coaching staff, the people that are connected to you are there to help you grow. And so be open to it and utilize it. And I think one of the biggest like takeaways that I have, just again, being a coach, develop those relationships with the people that you're surrounded with, because like the memories that I take away from being in sport, a lot of them have nothing to do with my performance. They have to do with the relationships that I built with my coaching staff, with my teammates, and just that dynamic that now, like, I had almost my whole softball team at my wedding. Like, Tom, you were at my wedding. And so in the moment, yes, there's a lot of pressure, and depending on what level you're at, whether you're playing high school, you're pursuing college ball, or whatever the sport is, stay in the grind, but know that it's not the end game. I feel like you're gonna take away so many more things once you're done. Once you hang up your cleats or whatever the sport that you're in, it's done. That's what's really important. And I'm glad that I took the time to develop the relationships that I have now, because again,
I'm glad too.
I think like 5 of my teammates were like in my bridesmaids crew. So like, nice. It's just, think about that. And I know, again, this is like more softball specific, but it's a very individual sport. And so we can kind of get carried away of like, well, I'm doing my job, and I did what I was supposed to, but we still lost kind of deal. And it's not about that. It's about the team. It's about being together and growing each other and being able to hold each other accountable. Because if, again, you could be successful all you want, but if your team isn't winning, how successful are you really?
Go play golf.
Yes. Go out for an individual.
Anything else that you wanted to add? I know that you spent a lot of time. Maybe you can just before we get to some of the more vanilla questions that we ask everyone. Okay. Is there something about? I know you talked about you spent a lot of time with growth mindset, and maybe you can just explain to the young people and to the old people what that means, because I know I could use some growth mindset right about now.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, it had me thinking, the only time I actually worked with male athletes was when I was at Orange Coast College, and we got asked by the head coach to do like sports like stuff with the football team. Nice. And that was so interesting. It was all the stuff that I've been doing with my softball girls, but now I got to do it with football guys. Right. And I was pleasantly surprised at them being so receptive, and just, I could tell that their wheels were starting to turn and they were taking it in, and they were very like engaging. So I just wanted to add that in. But for growth mindset, so that's like one of the first topics I work with any team that I'm a part of, because if I can't get them out of a fixed mindset, I'm not going to get very far with being able to coach them and them even being coachable. So what growth mindset is basically viewing challenges and viewing how you can become successful. Like you are able to grow as a person. So if I'm an athlete and I see a certain situation, I know, even though I might not be where I want to be yet physically or whatever the case is, I know that I am capable of growing. I know that I am capable of being able to do XYZ. Having a fixed mindset is seeing your growth as stagnant. And so that would be like kind of me saying, you know, like, I'm just not good at whatever that is. Like, I never knew how to do that. That's not my thing. And it's been interesting to have to work with my girls and have them reframe that thinking of them telling themselves for so long, like, I'm only, like, you know, if they're like, if I have a slapper who could easily get in some power, a slap hitter, like, no, I'm just a slapper. I'm just speed. I'm just this. And it's getting them out of the mindset of like, well, let's explore that. Let's see what you can do. Cause you know, maybe you'd be surprised you could actually hit one out. And so getting them outside of that, mentality, and then breaking down what their self-talk looks like in that. And so, like, how do they face challenges? Are they afraid to be successful in a challenge because then now they know that the expectation is here? Are they afraid of failure? Like, it's all these different things that kind of play into athletes and how they perform and how they view their performance and just being able to play. And I at least try to slow that down and help them think about the game as a whole and how they're playing it.
Do you find that environment, like their home environment and things, play a huge part in again, kind of, you have to break a lot of the cycles that come from their upbringing?
Oh yeah, I think, and again, I think that comes with, I think the biggest advice that I would give like coaches that listen on into this is like, get to know your players as an athlete, because as a person and also as an athlete. Because once I'm able to develop those relationships, if I see someone that I know isn't giving it their all because they're afraid to fail, like, I can now have that conversation with her and say like, okay, what's going on? Like, I see there's something going on. Like, you're not giving me 100%. I know you can do this. And having them at that point then have the trust in me to be able to talk it out, and we can collaborate and work, because I feel like had I not had that, it just doesn't work, at least in my perspective. Like, it's hard for me to get through to my girls when I don't have that style of relationship with them.
It's not efficient if you're just guessing. You're just trying stuff out, right? I mean,
right.
Coach, that's terrible.
And I think a lot of these girls growing up, and again with travel ball, a lot of them are thrown into like all these games, all the showcases, and they're like robots. Like, their game, their mental, their softball IQ is like a robot. Like, they know what to do in this situation. This equals this. But it's okay, once they have to like think the game and think different scenarios, okay, well, what if it's this type of runner and it takes you this way? Like, what else could you do in this situation? Like, they're not programmed, I guess, from the way that they're coached to when like I get them to think like that. Like, they don't think the game, they're just like reactive. They've been taught this, and there's no
do you remember play
thinking
softball?
Involved. Oh yeah.
Do you remember tell Chuck about play softball? What is that?
Or are you talking like what?
Remember when I used to tell you play softball, don't be a robot? Remember we used to catch the ground balls off our foot and throw the ball behind the back and all that.
So
shit.
We would. If I go shag, I purposely stand out in the outfield and then I wait for that like perfect ground ball, and I just like kick it up, throw it back in, and all the girls are like.
So Chuck, she was so well trained and so programmed as a player, and she mentioned the 6 errors, and that was a function of being stiff and being robotic, and she was a superior athlete for that to happen. And finally, I just said, stop this shit, and so I said, let's go play. and we would play horse. And we put the glove between our legs and backhands and sliding and kicking the ball off the foot, popping it up like a soccer player and grabbing it and throwing it. 360 throws. And I remember the head coach, God bless her. She's in the Hall of Fame, Chuck, of St. Paul softball.
Yeah, I know she is.
Yeah. And Stephanie would look at me and she'd be like, I just got to love this guy. I got to believe. I got to believe, because that's
shit.
Well, it's like
crazy.
It's like throwing, we used to say, I'd go out to practice every day and I'd stand at the 40-yard line while they were stretching, and I'd grab 2 footballs and I would throw them, 50 yards down the field to try and hit the goalpost.
Right.
Well, nobody ever remembered the times that I missed.
Right.
The time that I hit it on the first one and turned around and walked away and pretended like it was no big deal. Everybody went, wow.
Hey.
But it broke the tension of, you can do that stuff. You can do it. I'm just a regular guy. And if, you can get kids to relax on the field. And you had touched on something earlier that, if you can get kids to know that you care about them personally off the field, you can coach them a lot harder on the field.
Oh yeah.
That's such a great gift to be able to give to those kids, because it frees them up, because so much of their identities are made up of, does my coach like me? Does my coach care about me? Does my coach, want me to be a better person? I mean, those things are things that go unsaid, but they're really about why a lot of kids play sports, and to be able to let them know you love them and care about them off the field. What a great opportunity to unlock that ability to play freely without thinking, now you're just reacting and playing the game. And that's a strength for a coach to be able to get to that point. So
that's
it's neat
cool.
to hear you talk about that.
You kind of touched on it too, because one thing that I tried to, anytime that I can, because I know I was a product of it, anytime that I could give them a choice in anything, I try to give them the opportunity to make decisions, because you would not believe how, I'd be like, what do you guys want to eat? I don't know. They don't, I think they've just been told for so long, they just listen and they just do. And they don't ever analyze things or process things or they're not decisive. And so anytime that I can give them decisions, whether it's okay, these are our 2 options for today, how we're going to start, do you want to do this or this, and have them make a decision. And just teaching that skill, because even though it sounds so small, thinking back, we didn't have a lot of say in how our practices looked and how certain things happened. And so it was a lot of just reactive, this is what this was supposed to be, and no decisions were made. And then post sport, it's you're put into this situation where no one's telling you what to do. And you're just kind of looking okay, I don't know how to make decisions for myself. I need to have someone tell me what to do in order to be able to, do anything.
That's not a good, strong female program, by the way. We don't want that. We don't want that. I really love what you said, because that is a huge thing in my home with my kids, with my boys. I would tell Kyle or Elijah, okay, they're little guys, and I'm all right. Are you going to take out the trash, or are you going to empty the dishwasher? Which one are you going to do? And I'll do the other one. And that choice, and they're like, oh, I don't know, they both suck. And I'm like, well, I'm going to do the other one. I mean, that was just my thing, because we had the weekends or whatever. But I love that idea as a coach. My practice plan is so precious to me. And then for you to say, all right, do you want to do, backhands, or, what do you want to do? I'm like, wow, what a fantastic outside the box concept. Everyone can learn from that. Sure. Thank you so much for that. That's amazing.
So tell me, Tara, where are you going? You got a little baby, and you're hopefully getting ready to get back on the field. And what's the plan going forward?
Well, I mean, I eventually want to run my own program. That's kind of what I've always seen. And even knowing back when I've always known I wanted to be a mom, I want to be a parent, and being able to have my children, my son, with me at the field, this is something that I've always envisioned for myself. This is the only job that I could see myself doing, because I need to have my family with me. So ideally I want to run my own program, and I don't necessarily know what division that would be in yet. I think I'm still learning from the coaching end of, is Division III ideal for me? just because we're not, I only get them for so long, and I don't do a lot of anything with them in fall. And so just figuring that out. But I want to be able to like mold my athletes and see them through 4 years. I've done junior college, and to me, like, it's just too quick. I don't get enough time with them. I love the type of athletes that I get there, but it's like I just need more time. And so I think ideally, like, I want to be at a 4-year institution. I want to be able to be a head coach and build a successful program. But then also, like, I think what would be most meaningful to me is like getting the cards from the girls that I've coached of they're getting married now, or they're having their first kid, and still being able to keep those relationships going, or that communication, even though, I might not even talk to them for like 5 years, but then I get a Christmas card like, hey, we're getting married, or whatever the case is. Like, that's like my end goal of what
that happened to me. That happened to me last year. I don't know. I got some card about somebody's wedding. I don't know.
You made it out.
What a beautiful thing.
Tell us a little bit about some of the things you like to do. Are you a traveler? Are you a music junkie? Or what's your thing besides the sports?
I'd say like pre-COVID, I would love traveling, so I have 3 huge dogs. They're actually like knocked out right here. I love just like playing with them, taking them out to the parks. I'm a big dog enthusiast. They're huge. They're Mastiff mixes, or one's one's a Cane Corso, and the other 2 are mixes. So that's like something that I love to do. What else do I like to do? I haven't done it in a while, but I'm very like creative, artistic, I guess. And so I really like to paint. I haven't painted in a little while, but and when I lived in Missouri, I would have like my canvas out, and I would just like, do paintings and stuff.
Wow, that's super cool.
But I feel like now that like I'm in mom mode, it's keeping my child alive and spending time with him, and that's kind of like where my mind is.
Just put the paint on his belly, and then just mix it up, and
it takes over. That's for sure.
Let him roll around.
We were talking earlier. I grew up in a family with 6 boys, so it was like, I don't know how my mom even had any time to do anything at all. There was just a constant driving, picking up, and doing those kind of things. So being a mom is pretty time consuming. But I'm sure he's going to benefit from the coaching concepts that we talked about here and the things that you've been exposed to, and that's really cool to think about as well.
I sure hope so.
Yeah, don't be afraid.
Whatever sport, or if he decides sports, I'll be there.
He might be a cello player. You never know.
You know,
be a painter.
He's the best stinking cello player ever.
I think it's very important for you to show success to your child. That was something that I had with my boys. Like, I was out winning championships, and I was doing something special that other dads in the neighborhood weren't doing. And then they might have been making more money than me, obviously, but I was out impacting kids' lives. And I know Kyle would look at me like, well, you don't spend that much time with me, but don't be afraid of that. The kids are resilient. They will see, and ultimately you're going to have a village of 15 ball players. It's going to help raise that kid. I mean, Kyle was in the dugout at Dominguez Hills when he was 4 years old, and he used to, so this is a dad of the year mode. I say, okay, Kyle, and the girls would all be around in the dugout. I say, Kyle, how do you spell fun? And he'd say, W-I-N. And the girls would lose their shit. They'd be like, I'm going to call the cops on you, coach. You're fucking, like, that's how and I'm sure he went to kindergarten, and that's how he spelled fun, W-I-N. And, that was my freaking brainwashing, man, but he was around all these chicks, beautiful girls, badasses, so good stuff, man. Good stuff.
That's so funny.
I think we're on to the speed round, Tommy, and let's finish up, and we'll
is there a person who made an impact on your life that doesn't know it? I gave you these questions. I don't know.
Yes. Okay. And I'm glad you did. I I don't know if you remember, but in my graduate program, we kind of had like something like this in our positive psychology class. And so I was like, I've reached out to everyone. I feel like that, like at that point, I tried to tell anyone that I had like a significant, impact on my life.
Like a 12-step program.
Kind of. So I think one person, and I added pictures of her in like the ones that I sent you, would be my dad's mom, who I referred to as Grammy. She was just someone that was like the sweetest lady ever, but I get a lot of my stubbornness and just like my voice too from her. And I think seeing her and how competitive she would be in just like our card games and like how she would want dinner served and just little things, but then also be again like the sweetest person. She would go to all my games. She would go to like anything that she could go to. She would be there. And so she was somebody that I didn't get the chance to tell her thank you for teaching me, to not only being there and like actually supporting me in person, watching my games, because poor little thing, like she would always be so sunburned and we would always have to make sure she had like an umbrella or something out there. But she was just, she is somebody that had a huge impact on me and clearly knows it, but I did not voice it.
All right. I think we touched on this a little bit. Things every young athlete should know. Just, is there anything that just pops in your mind when you hear that?
But you don't know it all.
Right on.
And to be open to learning from the people that teach you.
I like it. I like it. What would you like to be known for in 50 years?
Someone that anybody can contact at any time and know that I would be there for them.
Very cool. If you had Bezos money, what would you spend it on to make your country or your community stronger? Where should the money go?
So I thought about this, and I want to stay in like the athlete world, because I got to be a part of a program at MIZZOU that was called the Total Person Program. And basically what we did, it was like a women's initiative and a men's initiative, and I worked with the women's, and we did different workshops in terms of just like social development. We talked about like what it looks like to go to a party, and if you're with one of your friends and they drink too much, like just different scenarios. Aspects in terms of yes. And I feel like that was the first time I'd ever seen it done with like those type of people. And
I would love to see that. Do you have documentation from that? I think that would be super.
I'm pretty sure I do. I can look to see, because we did. I'm sure I do.
Because we're still around. Chuck and I are around kids all the time. I mean, it's huge.
Well, I know like even the men, even to think it's so like predominant even now, but I remember one of the events that the men had, they brought in and had the cops talk to they had the cops talk to the men and just how to like hold yourselves accountable, and just I don't know, we were predominantly for sports of institution, and so we had men or head coaches sit and bring their wives. And so I wasn't like, I didn't get to see this, but the feedback is they had athletes ask the wives certain questions and the men couldn't answer, but they kind of just got to see then a relationship between a married couple and what that really looks cool. Like. And so I think if I had the means to be able to do something like that and get a better understanding, or just like an open dialogue of different people being able to come in and talk to these athletes about different aspects of just like life in general, that's something that I would really want to do, because everything that we did, I feel like the feedback was so strong. Like nice. We talked about vulnerability and shame and being a female athlete and what that looks like. And so that's something that I would want to do.
Man, that seems super worthwhile. That's super worthwhile.
I think would be on my heart to implement.
All right, so we got the speed round. Now we just had one speed round before in our first 10 episodes, but it was predominantly a dude thing.
Hold on. I think it's still playing on my headphones. I'm gonna take them off.
Take those things off. We'll cut all this out.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Okay, we can't hear you anymore.
Oh, boo.
Oh, there it goes. There it goes. There it goes. There it goes. Okay, ready? Now, do you want the women version or do you want the millennial version? What speed round would you like? Or do you want the man version?
Let's do millennial.
The millennial. Okay, ready? So it's a 50-50. It's an or situation. Drake or J. Cole?
Ooh, J. Cole.
Chris Hemsworth or Jason Momoa?
Chris Hemsworth.
Toy Story or Finding Nemo?
Toy Story.
Xbox or PlayStation?
PlayStation.
Coke or Pepsi?
Coke.
Beer or tequila?
Ooh, beer.
Android or iOS?
iOS.
Baseball or football?
Ooh, I'm gonna say football.
Yeah, you were at SEC school. You better.
Yeah.
Coffee or Red Bull?
Coffee.
TikTok or Instagram?
Instagram.
Megan Thee Stallion or Cardi B?
Megan Thee Stallion.
That's what my son said too. Vans or Converse?
Ooh, Converse.
Sushi or tacos?
Sushi.
All right, and I hope you know what this is because I don't know what this is. Dude with sign or cranberry juice guy?
Dude with sign.
The dude with the sign?
Dude aside,
Yeah.
Tommy, I'll send them to you. They're pretty funny.
They're really good.
Yeah.
I was into the Fleetwood Mac deal. I was like, oh, that guy's cool. Dogface or whatever his name is.
It's cool, but I picked dude with sign.
That's great. That's funny. Well,
Thank
Tara,
you so
thank you
much.
so much. That was absolutely fantastic, and loved hearing your points of view and sharing some of your personal stuff. Shout out to your husband who gave, who was probably on baby alert while you were with us, and we appreciate that too.
He
And
didn't wake up, so we're good. I have him
there
right
you
here.
go. That's fantastic. Well,
Watching.
good for you. That's outstanding. But
Surveillance.
thanks.
How to make sure,
Well, we have a lot of daughters in my family, a lot of aunts and cousins that are all female, and I'm going to be excited to let them listen to you and give them a little bit of opportunity to hear your point of view. But it's great to have you come on, and we thank you very much. It was a pleasure to meet you, and we'll look forward to maybe having you back down the road here, have you back on with maybe some more topics. So
Yeah, definitely like a round table.
I would love that.
All right, we'll see you later. We're gonna sit and talk. I'll catch up with you soon. Thanks again.
You got it.
Right,
Thank you guys.
Bye-bye. Well, that's it for us today. We want to thank Tara Alice and her family for letting her come on and share the wisdom with us. You could check us out on YouTube. You could check us out on Spotify. You could check us out on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher and everything else. And pretty much we just want you to be with us. We want you to be part of the Out Loud family. Don't forget the merch. Get yourself a shirt out Redbubble. But for now, peace and love.